The bitter wind swept across the fjord as Sigrid Narviksdottir stood atop the jagged cliff, her honey-blonde hair whipping around her face like Freyja's battle standard. 3 winters had passed since Ragnar Ingolfsson had sailed away on the longship Havfruen, promising to return with glory and riches enough to satisfy even her father's steep bride price. 3 winters of scanning the horizon until her eyes ached, of fending off suitors who circled like wolves around a wounded deer. "The sea has taken him," the villagers whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. "Odin has welcomed him to Valhalla." But Sigrid knew better. She had tied the knot herself, the sacred binding that would keep him safe on his journey. She had whispered the prayers to Njord and sacrificed her finest lamb. The gods would not be so cruel as to take him after she had honored them so faithfully. Yet doubt gnawed at her heart like a hungry wolf. What if the Skalds were right? What if the Norns had cut his thread? What if his body now fed the fish at the bottom of the cold, dark sea? No. She would not believe it. Not until she saw proof with her own eyes. Not until the gods themselves told her so. The village of Ravnfjord nestled between towering mountains and the deep, dark fjord, its wooden longhouses huddled together against the winter's bite. As Sigrid descended the cliff path, she saw the preparations for the midwinter feast already underway. Thralls scurried between buildings carrying firewood and skins of ale. Children darted between them, playing with wooden swords and shields, dreaming of the day they would earn glory in battle like their fathers. Sigrid! Her mother, Hilda, called from the doorway of their longhouse, the largest in the village save for Jarl Gunnar's hall. "Your father wishes to speak with you before the feast." Sigrid's heart sank. She knew what this meant. Another suitor. Another argument. Another night of her father's disappointment when she refused yet again. "I will come shortly, mother," she replied, adjusting the wool shawl around her shoulders. Her hands brushed against the iron Thor's hammer that hung from her neck, Ragnar's parting gift. "He grows impatient, daughter," Hilda warned, her voice soft but firm. "Torsten Vidarson has offered 12 silver pieces and 4 fine horses for your hand. Your father cannot refuse such a generous offer forever." "Then let him marry Torsten himself," Sigrid muttered, earning a sharp look from her mother. Inside the longhouse, Jarl Thorbrandsson sat by the central hearth, his grey-streaked beard illuminated by the dancing flames. A successful merchant and respected elder, Jarl had amassed considerable wealth through trade with lands to the south and east. His word carried weight at the Thing, and his pride was as vast as his reputation. "Daughter," he said without preamble as she entered, "you will attend the feast tonight at my side, and you will be courteous to Torsten Vidarson." Sigrid remained standing, her back straight as a spear shaft. "Father, I have told you, enough." Jarl slammed his fist against the wooden bench. 3 winters have passed. No word has come from Ragnar or his crew. The Havfruen is lost, daughter, and you dishonour both our family and his memory by clinging to a ghost. He swore an oath, Sigrid insisted, her voice steady despite the storm raging within. "He swore by Thor's hammer and Odin's eye that he would return to claim me as his bride. Oaths to the gods mean nothing if the gods themselves have other plans." Jarl's voice softened slightly. "You are 20 summers old now, Sigrid. It is time to accept what the Norns have woven and take a husband while you are still young enough to bear strong children." "I will wait until spring," she countered. "If Ragnar has not returned by the first Thor, then I will consider Torsten's offer." Jarl studied her face for a long moment, the firelight casting deep shadows in the crevices of his weathered face. Finally, he nodded. "Until the first Thor, then. But tonight, you will be civil." The great hall hummed with life as the village gathered for the midwinter feast. Torches blazed along the walls, casting golden light over the trestle tables laden with roast meat, fresh bread, and horns of mead. Skalds sang tales of brave warriors and cunning gods while children sat wide-eyed at their feet. The scent of wood smoke, roasted meat, and unwashed bodies filled the air, the familiar smell of home. Sigrid sat at her father's side, dressed in her finest blue wool gown with a string of amber beads adorning her neck. She had plaited her hair carefully and pinned it with a silver brooch, another of Ragnar's gifts. Let Thorsten see that she was already claimed, even if her father refused to acknowledge it. Thorsten Vidarsson was not an unpleasant man. Tall and broad-shouldered with a neatly trimmed beard the color of fox fur, he had earned respect in battle and possessed land of his own. In another life, Sigrid might have considered him a worthy husband. The southern raids were successful this year, Thorsten told her father as he tore a piece of bread from the loaf. My ship returned with silver, cloth, and 6 thralls from the Saxon lands. A good haul, Ingjal nodded approvingly. The Saxons grow soft with their Christ God. They no longer remember how to fight. Some do, Thorsten corrected. We lost 3 men in the raid on Lindisfarne. The monks had hired mercenaries to protect their treasures. A worthy death, then Ingjal raised his horn in salute. They feast in Valhalla now. Sigrid stared into her mead, seeing nothing. She had heard such talk her entire life, raids and battles and honorable deaths. She had watched the men sail away each summer and return with plunder and glory. She had helped tend the wounded and mourn the dead. But never before had she felt this hollow ache in her chest, this fear that gnawed at her day and night. "And what of you, Sigrid Njálsdóttir?" Thorsten turned his attention to her at last. "They say you are skilled with herbs and healing. A valuable skill for a wife to possess." "I know enough to treat common ailments," she replied, keeping her voice neutral. "My mother taught me well. She saved Ingrid's youngest last winter when the fever took him," her father boasted. "The child was nearly in hell's realm when my daughter brought him back." "Impressive," Thorsten nodded, his eyes assessing her with new interest. "My settlement could use such skills. We have no healer since old Geira passed to the next world." Before Sigrid could respond, the hall doors burst open, sending a blast of cold air through the room. A figure stood silhouetted against the darkness, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in furs crusted with ice and snow. "Shelter," the stranger called, his voice deep but strained. "I seek shelter from the storm." Jarl Gunnar rose from his high seat. "Enter, traveler, and share our fire. No man is turned away during the midwinter feast." The stranger stepped into the light, pushing back his hood to reveal a face weathered by sun and sea. A jagged scar ran from his temple to his jaw, disappearing into a dark beard threaded with silver. But it was his eyes that caught Sigrid's attention, pale blue, like the heart of a glacier, and somehow familiar. "I thank you, Jarl," the man said, bowing his head slightly. "I am called Rorik, a trader from the eastern settlements. My ship was damaged in the fjord to the north, and I have traveled on foot these past 3 days. Sit, eat, drink." Jarl Gunnar gestured to an empty place at one of the lower tables. "Tomorrow we will speak of your ship and what aid you require." Sigrid couldn't stop staring at the stranger. There was something about him, something in the way he moved, the set of his shoulders, that tugged at her memory like a half-forgotten dream. When he glanced in her direction, she quickly lowered her eyes, but not before catching the flash of recognition in his gaze. Impossible, she told herself. She would remember meeting such a man. Yet throughout the feast, she felt his eyes upon her, watching from the shadows of the hall. Whenever she dared to look his way, he seemed absorbed in conversation with those around him, but the sensation of being observed never faded. "You seem distracted tonight," Thorsten observed, refilling her horn with mead. "Are the Skald's tales not to your liking?" "Forgive me," Sigrid forced a smile. I was thinking of the stores of herbs I must gather before the deep snows come. Some of our supplies run low. A dutiful daughter, Torsten nodded approvingly. You will make a fine wife, Sigrid Njelsdottir. Later, as the feast wound down and the mead flowed freely, Sigrid slipped away from the high table. Her head ached from Torsten's attentions and her father's meaningful glances. She needed air, space to breathe away from the press of expectations. She found a quiet corner near the back of the hall, partially hidden behind one of the great support posts. Leaning against the rough wood, she closed her eyes and tried to still her racing thoughts. You still wear it, a voice said softly beside her. The hammer I gave you. Sigrid's eyes flew open. The stranger, Rorick, stood an arm's length away, his face half hidden in shadow. Up close, she could see that his beard concealed most of the scar, which appeared fresher than she had first thought. Her hand flew to the Thor's hammer at her throat. How do you know of this? I know many things, Sigrid Njelsdottir, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. I know that you still watch the horizon at dawn. I know that you refuse all suitors. I know that you still believe when all others have lost faith. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a smith's hammer on hot iron. Who are you? Speak plainly or I will call for the Jarl's men. The stranger stepped closer, into a pool of torchlight that illuminated his features. His eyes, those glacier blue eyes, held hers steadily. Once, you called me Ragnar, he said softly. The world tilted beneath her feet. Sigrid reached for the post to steady herself, disbelief warring with desperate hope. No, she whispered. Ragnar is dead. Lost at sea these 3 winters past. Not dead, he corrected. But changed. The man who left these shores is not the same one who stands before you now. She studied his face, searching for the features she had memorized in her dreams. The scar distorted his appearance, and the silver threading his beard aged him beyond his years. But those eyes, she would know those eyes in Hell's own realm. If you are truly Ragnar, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady, then tell me something only he would know. A sad smile crossed his face. On the night before I sailed, we met at the sacred grove beyond the northern ridge. You gave me a lock of your hair woven with red thread as a token of your love. I swore by Thor's hammer and Odin's eye that I would return to make you my bride, no matter what the Norns had woven for me. Sigrid felt as though the air had been stolen from her lungs. Ragnar, she breathed, reaching out to touch his face. What happened to you? Why do you come in disguise? Why, he caught her hand before she could touch him, his grip gentle but firm. Not here. There are eyes and ears everywhere. Meet me at the sacred grove at midnight. I will tell you everything then. But the storm. It has passed. The skies have cleared. He released her hand and stepped back into the shadows. Midnight, Sigrid. Come alone. Before she could respond, he was gone, melting into the crowd as though he had never been there at all. The sacred grove stood silent under a canopy of stars, the ancient pines dusted with fresh snow that gleamed silver in the moonlight. Sigrid picked her way carefully along the hidden path, her heart pounding with each step. Had she imagined the entire encounter? Would she find the grove empty, with only the night wind for company? But as she stepped into the clearing, she saw him, a dark figure standing before the weather-worn stone altar where generations of her people had made offerings to the gods. You came, Rorick, Ragnar said, turning to face her. Without the concealing shadows of the hall, she could see him clearly now. The scar was real, a jagged line that had barely missed his eye. His beard was indeed threaded with premature silver, and new lines marked the corners of his eyes. But beneath these changes, she could see the man she had loved, the strong jaw, the proud bearing, the intensity of his gaze. "I had to know the truth," she replied, keeping her distance. "3 winters I have waited, Ragnar. 3 winters with no word, no sign that you lived. And now you return as a stranger with a different name and face. What am I to make of this?" Ragnar sighed, his breath forming a cloud in the cold air. "I owe you the truth, all of it. It is a long tale, and not a pleasant one." "I have waited 3 years," Sigrid said. "I can spare one night." He nodded, gesturing to a fallen log beside the altar. When they were seated, he began his tale. "We sailed south as planned, following the stars to the Saxon lands. The raiding was good, better than we had hoped. By midsummer, the Hafruen rode low in the water, heavy with silver, furs, and thralls. We planned to return before the autumn storms, with more than enough to satisfy your father's bride price." He paused, his eyes distant with memory. "But the gods had other plans for us. Off the Saxon coast, we encountered a fleet of ships, not Saxon, but Norse. Jarl Halvar Stormson's fleet." Sigrid inhaled sharply. Everyone knew of Halvar Stormson, the most feared raider on the western seas. His name was whispered with a mixture of awe and terror, even among their own people. We tried to avoid them, but Halvar had heard of our successful raids. He wanted what we had taken. Ragnar's voice hardened. "We fought. Many of our crew fell that day, including my blood brother Egil. But we could not prevail against 5 ships. In the end, Halvar took everything, our plunder, our ship, even our freedom." "You were enslaved?" Sigrid asked, horror creeping into her voice. Ragnar nodded grimly. "For 2 winters, I rode Halvar's ship alongside other captured warriors. We were valuable for our strength, but disposable if we showed any sign of rebellion. Those who resisted or tried to escape were killed as examples to the rest." He touched the scar on his face. "This was my reward for trying to flee during a raid on Frankish lands. Halvar's blade. He left me for dead on the shore, but the Franks found me. A Christian monk tended my wounds, though I was his enemy. He spoke our tongue, had been a captive himself in his youth. When I was strong enough, I worked my passage north on a merchant ship, then another, and another, always moving closer to home." "But why the disguise? Why not simply return as Ragnar Ingolfsson?" Sigrid pressed. His expression darkened. "Because Halvar Stormson sails these waters still. He has grown even more powerful in the years since our encounter. If he learns that I survived, that I escaped his judgment, he will come for me, and for anyone connected to me." Sigrid felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. "So Ragnar is truly dead, then? You have become Rorik to protect yourself?" "To protect us both," he corrected, reaching for her hand. This time, he took it in his own, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers. "I had to see you again, Sigrid. To know if you had waited, as I asked. To know if there was still hope for the future we planned." "I waited," she whispered. "But what future can there be now? You cannot reclaim your name or your place here. And I am promised to another if spring comes without Ragnar's return." "Spring is still many weeks away," he said, his eyes intent on hers. "Long enough to find a solution." "What solution can there be?" "My father has accepted Torsten's offer conditionally. If I refuse him now, without reason, then give him a reason," Ragnar interrupted. "Tell him you wish to marry Rorik the trader instead. I have skills and knowledge gained during my travels. I can establish myself here, build a new life, a life with you." Sigrid shook her head slowly. "My father would never accept a stranger with no family, no connections, no wealth to offer. Especially not over Torsten Vidarson. Then we leave, Ragnar said simply. There are settlements to the east where no one knows us. Places where we can start anew, together. You ask me to abandon my family, my home, everything I have ever known. I ask you to choose our love over the life that has been planned for you, he corrected. Is that not what we always dreamed of? A life together, forging our own path. Sigrid pulled her hand from his, rising to her feet. The girl who dreamed those dreams believed in honor and truth above all else. You ask me to build a new life on lies and deception. I ask you to survive. Ragnar stood as well, his expression hardening. Halvar Storm's son has sworn blood feud against all who defy him. If he learns I live, he will not rest until he has his vengeance. And he will destroy anyone who stands with me. So I am to give up everything I am, everything I believe, out of fear. Out of wisdom, he insisted. Out of love. Sigrid turned away, staring into the darkness between the ancient pines. I need time to think. This is too much to comprehend in one night. Time is the one thing we may not have, Ragnar warned. But I will give you what I can. 3 days. I will remain in the village as Rorik until then. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak further. Without looking back, she made her way out of the sacred grove, her mind whirling with impossible choices and her heart torn between joy at finding him alive and despair at the price of their reunion. The next day, the village buzzed with talk of the stranger. Rorik the trader had spoken with Jarl Gunnar about his damaged ship and had offered valuable furs and amber in exchange for assistance repairing it. He carried exotic goods from distant lands, silks from the Far East, spices from southern shores, and intricate metalwork unlike anything the village had seen before. He claims to have traveled as far as Miklagard, Inga the weaver told Sigrid as they worked at their looms. Can you imagine? The great city where the emperor's palace is plated with gold. It seems a fanciful tale, Sigrid replied carefully, keeping her eyes on her work. How can one man have seen so much of the world? He has the goods to prove it, Inga insisted. Freya Gudbrandsdottir traded 3 silver pieces for a length of silk so fine you can see through it. And they say he speaks 4 languages, ours, Saxon, Frankish, and even the tongue of the Eastern emperors. A man of many talents, Sigrid murmured, trying to hide the pride that swelled in her chest. Ragnar had always been clever, always dreamed of seeing distant lands. It seemed he had accomplished that much, at least, even if not in the way he had planned. That afternoon, as she gathered herbs in the forest edge, a shadow fell across her path. Your father has invited me to dine at your home tonight, Rorik said, keeping a respectful distance as though they were mere acquaintances. I thought you should know. Sigrid straightened, brushing dirt from her hands. My father invited you? Why? I offered to trade for his silver work, Rorik explained. He is known even in distant ports for the quality of his craftsmanship. And you thought to approach him directly? Sigrid couldn't keep the edge from her voice. To what end? To see you, he admitted quietly. And to assess what manner of man he is. If there might be a way to win his approval without revealing the truth. There isn't, Sigrid said flatly. My father values honor and reputation above all else. He would never consent to my marriage with a stranger of unknown lineage, no matter how wealthy or well-traveled. Then I must become a man worthy of his respect in other ways, Rorik insisted. I have brought wealth from my travels. I could establish a trading post here, become a valuable ally to the Jarl, in 3 days. Sigrid shook her head. You ask for the impossible. Rorik stepped closer, lowering his voice. Nothing is impossible if the gods will it, Sigrid. And I believe they have kept us both alive these 3 winters for a purpose." Before she could respond, voices called from the path leading back to the village. Rorik immediately stepped back, resuming the demeanor of a respectful stranger. "Until tonight, then," he said, bowing slightly before walking away. Dinner that night was an exquisite form of torture. Seated across from Rorik at her father's table, Sigrid was forced to pretend he was a stranger while every fiber of her being yearned to touch him, to speak freely with him, to confess to her parents that their long-lost future son-in-law had returned. Njal, impressed by Rorik's knowledge and the quality of his trade goods, was more animated than Sigrid had seen him in months. He questioned Rorik extensively about his travels, the markets of distant lands, and the goods that fetched the highest prices. "You seem to know much of the world for one so young," Hilda observed as she served roasted venison. "How many winters have you seen?" 28, good wife," Rorik replied with perfect courtesy. "I began my travels young, as apprentice to my father's trading business." "And where is your father now?" Njal inquired, his merchant's mind always seeking connections and opportunities. "Dead these 5 winters," Rorik said, his voice carefully neutral. "Our ship was attacked by raiders off the Saxon coast. I alone survived." The story was close enough to truth to make Sigrid flinch, though no one else noticed. "A harsh fate," Njal nodded gravely. "The sea gives and takes with equal measure." "Indeed." Rorik's eyes briefly met Sigrid's before returning to her father. "But I have rebuilt my fortune since then. I seek now to establish more permanent trading relationships in these fjords." Njal's interest visibly sharpened. "You plan to settle here?" "If the Jarl permits it," Rorik nodded. "I have traveled enough for one lifetime. I wish to build something lasting now, a home, a family, a legacy." "A worthy ambition," Hilda smiled warmly. "Though you may find our daughters less impressed by your travels than their fathers. Girls here dream of strong men who stay home to protect them, not wanderers who disappear for years at a time." Sigrid nearly choked on her mead, earning a concerned glance from her mother. "Are you well, daughter?" Hilda asked. "Yes, mother," Sigrid managed. "The mead went down the wrong way, that's all." "Perhaps some would prefer stability," Rorik conceded with a diplomatic smile. "But I have found that the most worthy women value a man's character over his circumstances. His honor, his word, his loyalty to those he loves, these matter more than whether he stays in one place all his life." "Fine words," Njal nodded. "But a man must prove his worth with actions, not just pretty speech." "I could not agree more," Rorik said, holding Njal's gaze steadily. "And I intend to do just that." The rest of the meal passed in similar fashion, careful questions, measured responses, and the constant, simmering tension of unspoken truths. By the time Rorik took his leave, Sigrid felt as though she might shatter from the strain of maintaining the pretense. "A fascinating man," her father commented as they cleared the table. "Well-spoken and clearly successful in his ventures. If he does establish himself here, he would make a valuable connection." "He has no family, no history that we know of," Hilda pointed out. "For all his fine goods and finer tales, he could be anyone." "True enough," Njal conceded. "But the Jarl seems taken with him. And his knowledge of distant markets could prove useful to us all." Sigrid kept her eyes on her task, afraid that her face might reveal too much if she looked at her parents. "He seems honorable," she said carefully. "Despite his misfortunes." Her father gave her a sharp look. "Do not get ideas, daughter. You are still promised to Torsten come spring if Ragnar does not return. A merchant with no roots may be useful for trade, but he is no match for a proven warrior with land and influence. I was merely making an observation, father, Sigrid replied, keeping her voice neutral. I know my duty to our family. But as she lay awake that night, staring at the darkness above her bed, she wondered if duty alone would be enough to make her deny the truth her heart knew. Ragnar lived. He had come back to her, against all odds. How could she turn away from that miracle, even to honor her father's wishes? Yet how could she dishonor her family name by running away with a man who now lived as someone else? A man who proposed to build their future on a foundation of lies? The next 2 days passed in a blur of confusion and stolen moments. Rorik established himself in the village, trading his exotic goods for local products and ingratiating himself with the Jarl and elders. He spoke of plans to build a small trading post on the edge of the settlement, with boats to carry goods up and down the fjord. Sigrid watched from a distance, her heart torn between pride in his resourcefulness and fear for their future. She saw how easily he fit himself into the community, how quickly people warmed to his knowledge and his respectful manner. If anyone suspected his true identity, they gave no sign of it. On the second night, they met again in the sacred grove, this time with a full moon illuminating the snow-covered clearing. Your father respects me, Ragnar said without preamble. He values what I know, what I can offer the village. As a trader, yes, Sigrid agreed. Not as a husband for his daughter. That will come in time, he insisted. When he sees that I can provide for you, that I bring connections and opportunities that even Torsten cannot match, time is the one thing we don't have, she reminded him, echoing his own words. Tomorrow is the third day, Ragnar. You said yourself that you cannot linger here too long without risking discovery. Then come with me now, he urged, taking her hands in his. Tonight. We can be far down the field by dawn, beyond reach of your father's anger. And go where? To live in fear of Halvar Stormson for the rest of our days. If necessary, yes. His grip tightened. I would rather live one day with you as my wife than 1,000 years without you, Sigrid. Even if that day must be spent looking over my shoulder. Sigrid pulled her hands free. And what of honor? What of the oaths we swore? You promised to return and claim me properly, with your head held high and my father's blessing. This skulking in shadows, this life of lies, this is not what we pledged to each other. The gods have changed the pattern of our WYRD, Ragnar said, his voice hardening. We must adapt or be destroyed by it. Perhaps, Sigrid conceded. But not like this. Not by abandoning everything we once held sacred. What would you have me do? He demanded, frustration evident in every line of his body. Reveal myself? Challenge Torsten for your hand? Either action would bring Halvar's wrath down upon this village, upon your family. There must be another way, Sigrid insisted. A way that honors both our safety and our principles. If you know of one, speak it now, Ragnar challenged. For I have searched my mind and heart these past 3 years and found no path that doesn't lead to either separation or danger. Sigrid was silent for a long moment, watching the moonlight play across the snow. Finally, she raised her eyes to his. There is one possibility we have not considered. Which is? We end the threat of Halvar Stormson once and for all. Ragnar stared at her as though she had suddenly started speaking in an unknown tongue. You cannot be serious. Why not? You said yourself he raids these waters. Sooner or later, he will come to our fjord, our village. When he does, we will be ready for him. You speak of taking on the most feared raider in the western seas, Ragnar said incredulously. A man with 5 ships and crews loyal to him unto death. With what army do you propose we face him? With truth, Sigrid said simply. With the strength of our people when they know what is at stake. Halvar has made enemies everywhere he sails. We would not stand alone if we rallied others to our cause. You would risk everything on such a desperate gamble. Is it more desperate than living a lie? Than abandoning our home and our people to save only ourselves? Ragnar turned away, staring into the darkness between the trees. For a long moment, only the whisper of wind through the pines broke the silence. It would mean revealing who I am, he said finally. Telling your father, the Jarl, everyone, the truth of what happened. It would mean admitting that I returned not as the successful raider who left these shores, but as a man who failed in his promise. You did not fail, Sigrid moved to stand beside him. You survived against impossible odds. You kept your oath to return to me, even knowing the danger. There is no shame in that, only honor. And if Halvar comes before we are ready? If he destroys everything we love in his vengeance, then we will face that fate together, Sigrid said firmly. As we always planned to face whatever the gods sent our way. Ragnar was silent for so long that Sigrid feared she had pushed him too far. But when he finally turned to face her, his eyes held a resolve she remembered well, the unwavering determination that had first drawn her to him. Very well, he said quietly. We will try your way. Tomorrow, at the evening meal in the Great Hall, I will reveal myself to the Jarl and speak the truth of Halvar's crimes against our people. I will stand with you, Sigrid promised, taking his hand once more. Whatever comes, we face it together. The Great Hall was crowded that night, as it often was in the deep of winter when people sought warmth and companionship to ward off the darkness. Jarl Gunnar sat in his high seat, surrounded by his most trusted warriors and advisors. Sigrid's family occupied their usual place of honor near the Jarl's table, with Torsten Vidarson seated beside them as an acknowledged suitor. Rorik had been given a place of reasonable honor as well, a sign of the Jarl's interest in establishing trade connections through him. He sat quietly, speaking little, his eyes occasionally meeting Sigrid's across the crowded room. As the meal progressed and horns of mead were emptied and refilled, Jarl Gunnar called for entertainment. Let us have songs to warm our hearts on this cold night, he proclaimed. Who among us will share a tale or melody? Several skalds stepped forward, offering sagas of gods and heroes that everyone had heard many times before. The hall settled into the comfortable rhythm of familiar stories until, unexpectedly, Rorik rose to his feet. If the Jarl permits, he said, his voice carrying easily through the hall, I would share a tale not often told in these parts, a saga of treachery and survival that may interest this honorable company. Intrigued, Jarl Gunnar gestured for him to continue. Speak, trader. We are eager to hear new tales. Rorik moved to the center of the hall, where the firelight illuminated his features clearly for all to see. Sigrid's heart hammered against her ribs, knowing what was to come. I speak not of ancient heroes or legendary battles, Rorik began, his voice taking on the cadence of a skilled storyteller, but of events that transpired these past 3 winters, in waters not far from this very fjord. He told the tale as they had agreed, the story of a ship from this very village, the Havfruen, laden with the spoils of successful raids in Saxon lands. He spoke of the ambush by Halvar Stormson's fleet, the brutal battle that followed, and the enslavement of those who survived. Many brave warriors died that day, he said, his eyes sweeping the hall. Men whose names were known in this village, Egil Thorvaldsson, Gunther the Red, Sten Fairhair, and others whose bodies were given to the sea without proper rites. A murmur swept through the hall as people recognized the names of men long thought lost. Sigrid saw her father sitting straighter, his attention wholly captured. Those who survived the battle faced a fate some might consider worse than death, Rorik continued. Chained to the oars of Halvar's ships, forced to row until their hands bled and their backs broke, watched constantly for any sign of resistance or weakness. He touched the scar on his face. This is what awaited any who dared to dream of freedom. Halvar Staunton's blade, and a slow death alone on foreign shores. How do you know these things, trader? Jarl Gunnar demanded, his voice heavy with suspicion. These men you name were from our village, our families. Their fate has been unknown to us these 3 winters. Rorik straightened to his full height, squaring his shoulders as he had when he was still Ragnar Ingolfsson, the most promising young warrior of Ravnfjord. I know because I was there, he said clearly. I was not always called Rorik, nor was I always a trader of goods from distant lands. With deliberate movements, he reached up and untied the leather thong that held his beard in place, revealing that much of it was false, a disguise carefully crafted to alter his appearance. Next, he pushed back his hair to fully display the scar that marked his face. My name is Ragnar Ingolfsson, he declared, his voice ringing through the suddenly silent hall. Son of Ingolf Eriksson, helmsman of the Havfruen, and betrothed to Sigrid Njalsdottir of this village. The hall erupted in chaos. Men leaped to their feet, women gasped or cried out, and Jarl Gunnar bellowed for silence. In the confusion, Sigrid saw her father's face drain of color, saw Torsten's expression harden into something dangerous, saw her mother's hand fly to her mouth in shock. When order was finally restored, Jarl Gunnar fixed Ragnar with a penetrating stare. Bold claims require bold proof, stranger. Ragnar Ingolfsson was known to many here. If you are he, then prove it beyond the telling of a tale any man might have heard. Ask what you will, Ragnar replied steadily. I will answer. For the next hour, Ragnar faced a barrage of questions from the Jarl, from village elders, from men who had known him since boyhood. He recalled details of raids they had undertaken together, spoke of events from his youth that only a true son of the village would know, and recounted private conversations that could not have been invented. Finally, old Torfi the blacksmith rose from his seat. It is him, he declared. I would know the son of my oldest friend anywhere, despite the scar and the years. This is Ragnar Ingolfsson, returned from the dead. A ripple of astonishment passed through the hall. People who had thought him long dead now stared in wonder at the man standing before them. If you are truly Ragnar, Ingjal said, finding his voice at last, then why this deception? Why return as a stranger to your own people? Because of Halvar Staunton, Ragnar answered grimly. He believes me dead, and that belief is all that has kept this village safe from his vengeance. Had I returned openly as myself, his spies would have carried word to him within days, and his ships would have followed soon after. You fear this raider so much? Torsten scoffed, rising to his feet. The Ragnar I knew was no coward. The Ragnar you knew had not seen entire villages put to the torch for defying Halvar's will, Ragnar replied evenly. I fear not for myself, Torsten, but for everyone here, including Sigrid, whom I swore to protect above all others. Before Torsten could respond, Jarl Gunnar raised his hand for silence. If what you say is true, then this Halvar Storm's son is a threat not just to you, but to all our people. A man who enslaves fellow Norsemen, who attacks without provocation or honor, such a man cannot be allowed to roam our waters unchallenged. That was my thought as well, Jarl. Ragnar inclined his head respectfully. Which is why I have returned not just to reclaim my place here, but to warn you of the danger that approaches. Halvar raids further north each season. It is only a matter of time before he turns his eyes to the riches of this fjord. Then we must prepare, the Jarl declared. We must strengthen our defenses, build more ships, train more warriors. We must do more than that, Ragnar countered. We must unite with other settlements that have suffered at Halvar's hands. Alone, we cannot stand against his fleet. Together, we might end his reign of terror once and for all. A murmur of approval rippled through the hall. The prospect of a great alliance, a joining of forces against a common enemy, appealed to the warrior spirit of the village. And what of your betrothal? Njal asked, his voice cutting through the growing excitement. You return after 3 winters to find your intended all but promised to another. What say you to that? All eyes turned to Sigrid, who had remained silent throughout the revelations. She rose slowly from her seat, her head held high. My father gave me until the first Thor to honor my pledge to Ragnar, she said clearly. I have kept faith with that pledge, as has he, returning against all odds to claim what was promised. You cannot mean to honor a betrothal made so long ago, Torsten protested, his face darkening with anger. I have offered a generous bride price, proved my worth in battle and council. This man returns with nothing but a scar and a tale of woe. He returns with his life and his honor intact, Sigrid countered. He returns having survived trials that would have broken lesser men. What greater proof of worth could any woman ask? The girl speaks truth, old Torfi nodded. Survival against such odds is a sign of the gods' favor. They have preserved Ragnar Ingolfsson for a purpose. Perhaps, Njal conceded grudgingly. But a father must consider practical matters as well as the gods' will. Ragnar left a promising warrior. He returns a man hunted by powerful enemies, with no wealth, no standing, no means to provide for a wife. That is not entirely true, Ragnar said. The goods I brought as a Rorik are mine, acquired through honest trade during my journey home. And I have knowledge now of distant markets, of languages and customs that could bring prosperity to this village for generations to come. Knowledge is not silver, Njal pointed out. But it can earn more silver than any raid, Ragnar countered. Ask the traders of Hedebai or Birka if this is not so. Jarl Gunnar, who had been listening intently to the exchange, raised his hand for silence once more. These matters of betrothal can be settled between the families concerned, he declared. Of greater importance to all of us is the threat posed by Halvar Stormson. Ragnar, you will tell us everything you know of his ships, his men, his tactics. We must prepare for the day when he discovers you live. The discussion turned to matters of defense and alliance, with Ragnar at the center, providing details of Halvar's strengths and weaknesses. Sigrid watched with pride as the men who had once looked to him as a promising young warrior now listened to him as an equal, a man whose hard-won knowledge might save them all. Later that night, as the hall emptied and families returned to their homes to digest the extraordinary events of the evening, Njal drew Sigrid and Ragnar aside. I cannot say I am pleased by this turn of events, he told them bluntly. Torsten Vidarsson is a known quantity, a man of substance and influence. You, Ragnar, return to us as a question mark, a man changed by suffering, pursued by enemies, offering uncertain prospects. I understand your concerns, Ragnar acknowledged. But I also know that I can bring value to your family and this village, not through raids and plunder as I once planned, but through trade and the connections I have made on my journey home. Bold claims, Njal frowned. But words are wind until proven by deeds. Then let me prove them, Ragnar proposed. Give me until the first Thor, the same time you granted Sigrid to wait for my return. In that time, I will establish myself here, demonstrate the worth of my knowledge, and help prepare our defenses against Halvar. If, by the Thor, you still believe Torsten is the better match for your daughter, I will withdraw my claim and trouble you no further. Njal considered this proposal for a long moment, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. Finally, he nodded. Until the first Thor, then. But know this, Ragnar Ingolfsson, I will judge you not by the man you were when you left these shores, but by the man you have become in the years since. And that man is still a stranger to me. A fair condition, Ragnar agreed. I ask no more than the chance to prove myself worthy of your daughter and your respect. As winter's grip gradually loosened on the land, Ragnar worked tirelessly to fulfill his promise. he established trading connections with settlements up and down the fjord, using his knowledge of distant markets to create new opportunities for Ravnfjord's craftsmen and farmers. The goods he had brought as Rorik formed the foundation of a modest trading business, which grew steadily under his careful management. More importantly, he took a leading role in preparing the village for the possibility of Halvar's vengeance. He trained younger warriors in tactics he had observed during his captivity, supervised the strengthening of defenses along the fjord approach, and traveled with Jarl Gunnar to neighboring settlements to build the alliance they would need if Halvar's fleet appeared on their horizon. Sigrid watched his transformation with a mixture of pride and wonder. The Ragnar who had left their shores had been a brave warrior, eager for glory and adventure. The man who returned was something more, tempered by suffering, wise beyond his years, focused not on personal glory but on the protection and prosperity of his people. Their own relationship transformed as well. No longer the secret, stolen moments of young lovers, but the steady partnership of adults who had faced the worst the world could offer and survived. They spoke openly now of their future, making plans that acknowledged both the promise of their union and the shadow that Halvar cast over their happiness. As the first signs of spring appeared, snowdrops pushing through the melting drifts, longer days brightening the fjord waters, Ingjal called Ragnar to his home once more. This time, he invited not only Sigrid but Torsten as well, making clear that the time had come for a final decision. "The thaw is upon us," Ingjal said without preamble as they gathered around his hearth. "As promised, I have watched and judged during these winter months. Now I must decide where my daughter's future lies." Torsten stood proud and confident, secure in his position as a respected warrior and landholder. "I have been patient, Ingjal Thorbrandsson," he said. "I have honored your condition and allowed this, returned warrior, to make his case. But my offer stands as before, and my worth is proven beyond question." "Your worth is not in doubt," Torsten, Ingjal acknowledged. "Any father would be proud to call you son." Ragnar remained quiet, his face calm despite the tension that Sigrid could see in the set of his shoulders. He had worked himself to exhaustion these past months, proving his value not just to her father but to the entire village. Yet he knew, as did she, that tradition favored Torsten's claim, the established warrior over the returned wanderer, certainty over risk. Ragnar Ingolfsson Ingjal turned his attention to the younger man. "You asked for time to prove yourself worthy of my daughter's hand. What say you now of your achievements?" "I have done what I could in the time allowed," Ragnar replied simply. "I have established trade that brings new wealth to our village. I have shared knowledge that strengthens our defenses. I have renewed old bonds and created new alliances that will serve us all in the coming conflict." He paused, his eyes meeting Sigrid's briefly before returning to her father. "But my greatest achievement, the one that matters most to me, is keeping the oath I swore to your daughter before I sailed. Against all odds, despite captivity and near death, I returned to claim her hand, as I promised I would." "Pretty words," Torsten scoffed. "But words do not feed a family or defend a homestead. What can you offer Sigrid that I cannot? Land? Status? Security? Perhaps not those things, not yet," Ragnar conceded. "But I offer her a love that survived 3 years of separation and suffering. I offer her a partnership based on mutual respect and shared dreams. I offer her a man who crossed half the known world to keep his promise to her." Ingjal studied both men in silence, his expression unreadable. Sigrid held her breath, knowing that her father's decision would shape the course of her life. "I have watched you both these past months," Ingjal said finally. "Torsten, you are everything a father could wish for his daughter, established, respected, secure in your position. You would provide well for Sigrid and any children she might bear." Torsten nodded, a small smile of satisfaction curving his lips. "But you, Ragnar," Ingjal continued, turning to the younger man, "You have shown qualities I did not expect. Resourcefulness, wisdom, vision for the future. You have earned the respect of men who once dismissed you as lost or dead. And most importantly, you have kept faith with my daughter through trials that would have broken most men." He sighed heavily, looking from one to the other. How is a father to choose between such men? One offering the certainty of the known path, the other the promise of something new and untried. "There is no choice to make, father," Sigrid said quietly, speaking for the first time. "My heart has been pledged to Ragnar since before he sailed." That pledge did not weaken during his absence, it only grew stronger with the test of time and separation. "A daughter's heart is important," Ingjal acknowledged. "But a father must consider more than that." "Then consider this," Sigrid pressed. "Which man has proven his loyalty not just to me, but to our entire people? Which man risks his life even now to protect our village from a threat that he could have simply avoided by staying away?" Ingjal glanced at Torsten, whose face had darkened at Sigrid's words. "She speaks truly," the older man admitted. Ragnar could have remained Rorik indefinitely, or settled elsewhere beyond Halvar's reach. Instead, he chose to reveal himself and face the danger, for her sake and ours. "And for that, he would risk all our lives," Torsten said harshly. "Halvar Storm's son may come for him and destroy us all in the process." "Halvar would have come eventually," Ragnar countered. "At least now we are prepared, united with other settlements, ready to face him together." Ingjal raised his hand for silence. "Enough. I have heard all I need to hear." He turned to Torsten with respect in his eyes. "You are a worthy man, Torsten Vidarson, and I thank you for your patience and your honorable conduct throughout this matter. But I cannot ignore the hand of the gods in what has transpired. Ragnar's return against all odds, his growth from warrior to leader, the timing of these events, all speak of a fate woven by the Norns themselves." He reached out to clasp Ragnar's arm. "The bride price you offered before you sailed is no longer necessary. You have paid a higher price in blood and suffering, and you have returned with gifts more valuable than silver, knowledge that may save us all from Halvar's wrath. If my daughter still chooses you, then you have my blessing to wed when the spring planting is complete." Sigrid felt tears spring to her eyes as relief and joy washed over her. "Thank you, father," she whispered. Torsten's face had hardened into a mask of controlled anger. "I accept your decision, Ingjal Thorbrandsson," he said stiffly. "But I warn you, this man brings the shadow of death with him. When Halvar's ships appear on our horizon, remember that you chose this path." "When Halvar comes," Ragnar replied evenly, "we will face him together, as a united people. And we will end his reign of terror once and for all." Torsten turned without another word and strode from the house, his back rigid with wounded pride. "He will come around," Ingjal sighed. "He is a good man at heart, just disappointed in his hopes." "I have never doubted his worth," Ragnar acknowledged. "Only his claim to Sigrid's hand." "Which is now settled," Ingjal declared. "Let us speak now of wedding plans, and of how we continue to prepare for the day when Halvar discovers the truth." That day came sooner than any of them had expected. Barely a week after the spring planting was complete, and 3 days after Sigrid and Ragnar exchanged vows before the assembled village, the watchman on the headland spotted sails on the horizon. Not the expected trading vessels from the south, but 5 longships with red-striped sails that Ragnar recognized immediately. "Halvar," he said grimly as the warning horn sounded across the village. "He comes earlier in the season than I expected." "How did he learn you live?" Sigrid asked, her hand finding his as they hurried toward the great hall where the Jarl was gathering the village defenders. "It matters not," Ragnar replied. "What matters is that we are ready for him." And they were ready. The winter months of preparation had transformed Ravensfjord from a vulnerable settlement into a stronghold. Defensive walls had been reinforced, weapon stocks increased, and warriors trained in new tactics. Most importantly, the alliance Ragnar had helped forge with neighboring settlements meant that Halvar's 5 ships would face not just Ravensfjord's defenders but a united force from 3 villages. As the women, children, and elders were evacuated to the safety of the forest stronghold, Jarl Gunnar addressed the assembled warriors. "This day has long been foretold," he declared, his voice carrying across the gathered men. "Halvar Storm's son comes to our shores not knowing that we stand ready for him. He expects to find a vulnerable village, ripe for plunder. Instead, he will find warriors prepared to defend their homes and families to the death." A roar of approval greeted his words, spears and axes raised in salute. "Ragnar Ingolfsson," the Jarl continued, "you have warned us of this day, prepared us for this battle. It is fitting that you should stand at the forefront when Halvar's ships reach our shore." Ragnar stepped forward, his eyes meeting Sigrid's where she stood with the other women preparing to retreat to the forest stronghold. They had discussed this moment many times during the winter months, he to fight, she to lead those who could not battle to safety. Yet now that the moment had come, they found it harder than expected to part. "I will join you before nightfall," he promised her quietly. "One way or another, this ends today." "It ends with victory," Sigrid insisted. "The gods did not bring you back to me through all those trials just to lose you now." Ragnar touched the Thor's hammer that still hung around her neck, the same one he had given her before sailing 3 years ago. "Keep this close," he said. "It protected you while I was gone. Now it will protect us both." The battle that followed would be remembered in sagas for generations to come. Halvar's ships approached confidently, expecting to surprise an unprepared settlement. Instead, they found warriors waiting on the shore, archers positioned on the cliffs above, and allied ships blocking their retreat back to open water. Halvar himself led the assault, recognizing too late that he had sailed into a trap. When he spotted Ragnar among the defenders, the man he had left for dead on a distant shore, his rage was terrible to behold. He fought his way through the defending line, seemingly intent on reaching Ragnar alone. "You should have remained dead, slave," he bellowed as their weapons clashed. "Now your entire village will pay the price of your defiance." "The only one who pays today is you, Halvar Storm's son," Ragnar replied, parrying the older warrior's fierce attack. "For every man you enslaved, for every innocent you slaughtered, for every oath you broke, today brings your reckoning." Their battle raged across the shore as around them, the larger conflict swirled and shifted. Halvar's men, though fierce, found themselves outnumbered and outmaneuvered by the allied forces. One by one, their ships were captured or driven onto the rocks by the allied vessels that had sealed the entrance to the fjord. As the tide of battle turned decisively against the raiders, Halvar fought with the desperate fury of a man who sees his doom approaching. A savage blow caught Ragnar on the shoulder, driving him to one knee. Halvar raised his axe for the killing stroke, only to stagger backward as an arrow struck him in the chest. From the edge of the forest, Sigrid lowered her bow, her eyes meeting Ragnar's across the battlefield. She had not retreated to the forest stronghold as planned but had positioned herself where she could watch the battle unfold, where she could protect the man she had waited 3 years to reclaim. Halvar, wounded but not dead, lunged again at Ragnar with a roar of fury. This time, Ragnar was ready. With a move learned during his years of captivity, he sidestepped the attack and drove his sword deep into Halvar's side. The raider fell to his knees, blood pouring from the mortal wound. "My men will avenge me," Halvar gasped, his eyes already dimming. "This is not the end." "Your men are captured or dead," Ragnar told him. "Your ships are taken. Your reign of terror ends today, Halvar Storm's son. May the gods judge you as you deserve." With a final curse, Halvar collapsed onto the blood-soaked sand. Around them, the remaining raiders, seeing their leader fall, threw down their weapons in surrender. The victory celebration lasted 3 days. Warriors from all 3 allied settlements gathered in Ravnfjord's great hall to share tales of the battle, honor the fallen, and divide the considerable spoils taken from Halvar's ships. Among those spoils were found treasures stolen from dozens of raids along the coast, including items that had been taken from the Havfruen 3 years earlier. The gods have a strange way of bringing things full circle, Jarl Gunnar observed as he presented Ragnar with a silver arm ring that had once belonged to his father. What was taken from you returns now, along with your honor and your place among us. Not everything returns, Ragnar said quietly, thinking of the men who had died aboard the Havfruen, of the years lost to captivity and struggle. But enough to build a new future upon. That future began to take shape in the days and weeks that followed. With the threat of Halvar removed, trade flourished along the coast. Ragnar's connections and knowledge proved invaluable as Ravnfjord established itself as a center for commerce rather than raiding. The wealth that flowed into the settlement brought prosperity to all, fulfilling Ragnar's promise to create something lasting for his people. For Sigrid and Ragnar, personal joy matched the village's good fortune. Their union, tested by separation and struggle, grew stronger with each passing season. When winter came again, it found them settled in their own home near the shore, Sigrid's belly swollen with their first child. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked him one night as they lay together, watching the flames dance in their hearth. "The raids, the years lost, the path that led you away from me only to return so changed." Ragnar considered the question seriously, his hand resting on the curve of her stomach where their child grew. "I regret the suffering," he said finally. "I regret the men who died. But I cannot regret the journey itself, for it made me the man I am now, a man who values peace over war, building over destroying, love over vengeance." "The gods knew what they were doing," Sigrid murmured, placing her hand over his. "They sent you away so you could return when we needed you most, not just me, but all our people." "Perhaps," Ragnar agreed. "Or perhaps they simply gave us the strength to forge our own fate when all seemed lost." Either way, they had created something neither of them had imagined on that long-ago day when he sailed away promising to return. Not just a marriage or a family, but a new way forward for their people, one built on trade rather than raiding, on alliance rather than conquest. And when their son was born with the first snow of winter, they named him Harald, army ruler, not as a promise of future conquests, but as a reminder that true strength comes not from dominating others but from leading them toward a better future. The stranger who had watched from the shadows was gone forever. In his place stood Ragnar Ingolfsson, husband, father, leader, a man who had journeyed through darkness to find a light worth fighting for.